The morning sun cast a golden glow over the grand gardens of Windsor Castle. Princess Charlotte, dressed in her favorite blue dress with white polka dots, was running through the perfectly manicured lawns. Her laughter echoed through the palace grounds as she chased butterflies that danced among the roses. The young princess had always been known for her curious nature and boundless energy, traits that sometimes worried the royal staff. Charlotte had woken up earlier than usual that Saturday morning. Her parents, Prince William and Princess Catherine, were attending an important meeting with foreign dignitaries. Her older brother George was at a friend's birthday party, and little Louis was taking his afternoon nap. This meant Charlotte had some rare time to herself, and she was determined to make the most of it. Her nanny, Maria, had briefly stepped inside to answer an urgent phone call, instructing Charlotte to stay near the garden fountain where she could see her from the window. But Charlotte, being the adventurous 7-year-old she was, spotted something that caught her attention. Near the eastern wing of the palace, she noticed a beautiful peacock strutting across the lawn. Its magnificent tail feathers shimmered in shades of blue and green, creating a mesmerizing display. Without thinking twice, Charlotte decided to follow the peacock. She wanted to see it up close, perhaps even touch those beautiful feathers. The bird seemed to be leading her on a merry chase, always staying just out of reach. Charlotte giggled as she ran, her small feet carrying her further and further from the fountain where she was supposed to wait. As she rounded a corner near the old stone walls, Charlotte suddenly realized she had wandered into an unfamiliar part of the palace grounds. The buildings around her looked different, more official, and less like the family areas she knew. She stopped running and looked around, her smile fading slightly. The peacock had disappeared somewhere among the hedges, and now Charlotte found herself in what appeared to be a service courtyard. Large black cars were parked in neat rows, and men in dark suits were walking purposefully between buildings. Charlotte recognized them as security personnel, the kind who always stood very still and looked very serious. She had been taught to respect their work and not to disturb them when they were on duty. For a moment, Charlotte considered retracing her steps, but as she turned around, she realized something troubling. All the pathways looked the same. The tall hedges and stone walls created a maze-like environment, and she couldn't remember which direction she had come from. A small knot of worry formed in her stomach. Charlotte was a brave little girl, but she was still just 7 years old. She didn't want to cry or cause a fuss, as her parents had taught her to handle difficulties with grace. But standing alone in this unfamiliar courtyard, she felt very small and uncertain. She knew she needed help, but she also knew the rules about not interrupting the guards when they were working. Near the corner of the courtyard stood a tall royal guard. He was wearing the traditional red uniform with a tall black bearskin hat. His face was stern and expressionless, and he stood perfectly still, looking straight ahead. Charlotte had seen guards like him many times before, standing outside Buckingham Palace and other royal residences. She knew they were trained to remain motionless and silent no matter what happened around them. The little princess bit her lip, unsure of what to do. She looked at the guard, then back at the confusing maze of paths behind her. She knew that breaking protocol was something royals were taught never to do. The guards had strict instructions, and disturbing them during their duty was considered inappropriate. But Charlotte was lost, and she didn't see anyone else around who could help her. Taking a deep breath, Charlotte smoothed down her dress and walked slowly toward the guard. Her heart was beating fast, and her hands were clasped nervously in front of her. She stopped a few feet away from him, looking up at his tall figure. The guard continued to stare straight ahead, not acknowledging her presence. This was exactly what he was trained to do. Charlotte cleared her throat softly. Nothing happened. The guard remained as still as a statue. She moved a little closer and spoke in her small, clear voice. Her words were polite and gentle, just as she had been taught by her parents. She explained that she was lost and needed help finding her way back to the family gardens. Still, the guard didn't move. Charlotte could see his eyes, though, and she thought she detected a slight flicker of recognition. He knew who she was, of course. Everyone at Windsor Castle knew the young princess. But his training was clear, and breaking protocol was a serious matter. Guards could face consequences for abandoning their posts or altering their behavior while on duty. Charlotte felt tears beginning to prick at her eyes, but she blinked them away. She was a princess, and princesses didn't cry over small problems. But she was also a little girl who was lost and wanted to find her way home. She looked up at the guard one more time, and this time, she did something that would change everything. She asked him for help in a way that was impossible for any kind-hearted person to ignore. The royal guard, whose name was James Mitchell, had been serving in the King's Guard for nearly 8 years. He had stood watch in rain, snow, and blazing sun. He had remained motionless while tourists took photos, while children made funny faces at him, and even when a pigeon once landed directly on his bearskin hat. His discipline was legendary among his fellow guards, and he took great pride in his ability to follow protocol perfectly. But standing before him now was not a tourist or a curious child making faces. This was Princess Charlotte, third in line to the British throne, and she was clearly distressed. James could see the worry in her young eyes, even as she tried her best to remain composed. His training screamed at him to remain still, to not break formation, to wait until his shift ended or until another staff member appeared. Charlotte looked up at the tall guard and did something unexpected. She didn't demand or command. Instead, she said something that touched his heart. She told him that she knew he was working very hard and that she didn't want to cause any trouble. She explained that she had followed a peacock and gotten lost, and that her nanny would be very worried about her. Then she added in her sweet young voice that she would be very grateful if he could please help her. Just this once. The way she said it with such genuine politeness and vulnerability made something shift inside James. He thought about his own niece, who was about Charlotte's age. He thought about how he would want someone to help her if she were lost and scared. He looked down at the little princess, saw her trying so hard to be brave, and made a decision that went against everything he had been trained to do. James broke protocol. Slowly, carefully, he moved his eyes down to look at Charlotte. It was a small movement, but it was significant. For a royal guard on duty, any movement was a breach of conduct. Charlotte's face lit up with hope when she saw his eyes meet hers. She gave him a small, grateful smile. Then James did something even more remarkable. He spoke. His voice was quiet but clear as he addressed the princess. He told her not to worry, that he would help her find her way back. He could see the relief wash over her small face, and it confirmed that he had made the right choice regardless of the consequences he might face later. James knew he couldn't simply abandon his post. That would be an even greater breach of protocol, but he also knew that helping a lost child, especially a member of the royal family, was more important than standing still. He quickly assessed the situation. He could see another guard stationed about 50 yards away at the next checkpoint. He could also see a security camera pointed at his position. Making a quick decision, James stepped down from his post and knelt down to Charlotte's level. This made him seem much less intimidating, and Charlotte visibly relaxed. He asked her where she had started her journey, and Charlotte explained about the fountain near the family gardens. James nodded. He knew exactly where that was. Before they could start walking, James did something clever. He spoke clearly toward the security camera, announcing that he was temporarily leaving his post to assist Princess Charlotte, who required immediate help. This way, the security team monitoring the cameras would understand the situation and could send someone to cover his position. It was still breaking protocol, but at least he was doing it in a way that minimized any security concerns. Charlotte reached up and took James's hand. Her small fingers wrapped around his gloved hand with complete trust. This simple gesture moved James more than he expected. Here was a princess raised in palaces and surrounded by luxury, treating him with such genuine warmth and trust. It reminded him why he had wanted to serve the royal family in the first place. As they began walking, James kept his pace slow to match Charlotte's smaller steps. He pointed out various landmarks to help her remember the way, explaining that the family gardens were located near the south wing, while they were currently in the East Service courtyard. Charlotte listened carefully, her curiosity returning now that she felt safe. Along the way, Charlotte started chatting with James. She asked him about his job, whether his hat was heavy, and if he ever got tired of standing still. James found himself answering her questions with a smile. She was remarkably mature for her age, yet still charmingly childlike in her wonder about the world around her. Charlotte told James about the peacock she had been chasing. She described its beautiful feathers and how it had seemed to be playing a game with her. James explained that the peacocks at Windsor often wandered around the grounds, and that they were indeed quite mischievous. He promised to show her where they usually gathered, so she could see them again without getting lost. As they walked through the palace grounds, They passed several other staff members. Some looked surprised to see a royal guard not at his post, walking hand in hand with the young princess. But when they saw Charlotte's happy face and heard her chattering away, they simply smiled and continued with their work. It was clear that no harm was being done, and that the guard was helping the princess. James carefully navigated through the maze of paths, always keeping Charlotte close. He pointed out various features of the palace architecture, telling her little stories about the history of Windsor Castle. Charlotte was fascinated, asking questions and showing a genuine interest in her family's heritage. James was impressed by her intelligence and curiosity. As they approached the family gardens, James could see Maria, the nanny, standing by the fountain. She was looking around anxiously, clearly worried about Charlotte's whereabouts. The moment she spotted them, relief flooded her face, followed quickly by concern about the situation. Maria rushed toward them, her face showing a mixture of relief and worry. She immediately knelt down to check on Charlotte, asking if she was all right and where she had been. Charlotte, still holding James's hand, explained the entire adventure about the peacock getting lost, and how the kind guard had helped her despite being on duty. James stood at attention as Maria listened to Charlotte's story. He could see the nanny processing what had happened, understanding that the guard had broken protocol but also recognizing that he had done so for a good reason. Maria looked up at James with gratitude in her eyes. She thanked him sincerely for taking care of the princess and bringing her back safely. Charlotte didn't want to let go of James's hand. She looked up at him and thanked him again, her voice filled with genuine appreciation. She told him he was very kind and brave for helping her. Then she asked him something that surprised both James and Maria. She asked if she could be friends with him. James didn't know quite how to respond. The protocol was clear about maintaining professional boundaries with the royal family. Guards were meant to serve, not to form personal relationships. But looking down at Charlotte's hopeful face, he found himself saying that it would be an honor to be considered her friend, though he would always remain respectful and professional in his duties. Charlotte beamed at his response. She promised that whenever she saw him on duty, she would wave at him, and maybe, if he wasn't being watched too carefully, he could give her a small wink to show he saw her. James couldn't help but smile at this suggestion. It was innocent and sweet, and it showed Charlotte's understanding that he still had important work to do. Maria gently reminded Charlotte that they needed to let James return to his duties. The guard had already been away from his post for quite some time, and there would likely be questions to answer. Charlotte nodded, understanding. But before James left, she did something that would become a cherished memory for him. She reached up and he bent down and she gave him a quick hug. The hug was brief and spontaneous, the kind of gesture that comes naturally to children. For James, it was a moment that made everything worthwhile. Whatever consequences he might face for breaking protocol, this moment of genuine connection with a child who needed help made it all meaningful. He stood up, gave Charlotte a proper bow, and thanked her for allowing him to assist her. As James walked back to the service courtyard, his mind was racing. He knew he would have to explain his actions to his commanding officer. Breaking protocol was a serious matter in the Royal Guard, and there would be questions, possibly even disciplinary action. But he also knew, deep in his heart, that he had made the right choice. Sometimes being human and kind was more important than following rules blindly. When James arrived back at his post, he found that another guard had taken his position. His colleague told him that the head of security wanted to see him immediately. James's stomach tightened with nervousness, but he kept his expression neutral. He followed his colleague to the security office, preparing himself for whatever consequences awaited him. The head of security, a stern man named Colonel Matthews, was waiting in his office. He gestured for James to sit down, which was unusual. Normally, guards stood at attention during such meetings. James sat, his back straight, his hands folded in his lap. He was ready to accept whatever punishment was deemed appropriate. Colonel Matthews looked at James for a long moment before speaking. He explained that the entire incident had been captured on security cameras. He had watched James break protocol, leave his post, and escort Princess Charlotte back to the family gardens. He had also seen the interaction between James and the princess, including the hug. James waited for the reprimand, but it didn't come. Instead, Colonel Matthews did something unexpected. He told James that while breaking protocol was indeed a serious matter, the circumstances were unique. Princess Charlotte was a child who was lost and in distress. She had asked for help, and James had provided it in a responsible and caring manner. The colonel explained that he had already spoken with Maria, the nanny, who had given a full account of what happened. She had praised James for his kindness and good judgment. More importantly, the princess herself had apparently told her parents about the incident when they returned from their meeting. Prince William and Princess Catherine wanted to meet with James personally. This news shocked James. He had expected punishment, not a meeting with the prince and princess. Colonel Matthews told him that the meeting was scheduled for the following morning, and that James should present himself in his dress uniform. The colonel also added, with a slight smile, that he didn't think James needed to worry about the meeting. It appeared that the royal couple was grateful, not angry. That evening, James could barely sleep. He kept replaying the day's events in his mind. He thought about Charlotte's sweet face, her polite request for help, and the trust she had shown in him. He thought about the decision he had made to break protocol, and how it had led to this unexpected turn of events. The next morning, James dressed in his finest uniform. He made sure every button was polished, every crease was sharp. He wanted to make a good impression, even though he was nervous about meeting the prince and princess face to face. Such meetings were rare for guards of his rank, and usually only happened during formal ceremonies. James was escorted to a private sitting room in the family wing of the palace. This was an area he had never been to before, as it was reserved for the royal family's personal use. The room was elegant but comfortable, with family photos on the walls and children's drawings displayed on a side table. It felt like a real home, not just a palace. Prince William and Princess Catherine entered the room moments after James arrived. He immediately stood at attention and bowed deeply, his training taking over despite his nervousness. The prince gestured for him to sit, and they took seats across from him. James noticed that they both had warm, friendly expressions on their faces, which helped ease some of his anxiety. Princess Catherine spoke first. She thanked James for taking care of Charlotte and bringing her safely back to the gardens. She explained that as parents, they had been very worried when they learned Charlotte had wandered off, but they were immensely grateful that she had encountered someone as responsible and kind as James. Her voice was sincere, and James could see the genuine emotion in her eyes. Prince William added that they understood James had broken protocol to help their daughter. He acknowledged that this was not a decision James would have made lightly, and that it showed good judgment and compassion. The prince explained that while they valued the traditions and discipline of the royal guard, they also believed that kindness and human decency should never be compromised, especially when a child needed help. James felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had been prepared for criticism or punishment, but instead he was receiving gratitude and understanding. He expressed his appreciation for their kind words and assured them that he had only done what he felt was right. He mentioned that seeing Charlotte distressed had reminded him of his own young niece, and that he couldn't have lived with himself if he had ignored a child in need. Princess Catherine smiled at this. She told James that Charlotte had talked about him non-stop since the incident. The princess had told her parents all about the kind guard who had held her hand, taught her about the palace, and made her feel safe when she was scared. Charlotte had even drawn a picture of James in his red uniform, which Princess Catherine showed him. James was touched to see the colorful drawing, which showed him and Charlotte holding hands with the Windsor Castle in the background. Prince William then brought up an important point. He explained that while they were grateful for James's help, they also needed to ensure that proper procedures were in place to prevent such incidents in the future. The royal family was working with security to implement better systems for monitoring the children during outdoor playtime. They didn't want James to feel that he was being blamed for any security lapses, as he had actually solved a problem rather than created one. James appreciated this clarification. He knew that palace security was constantly evolving to balance the family's safety with their desire for the children to have normal, happy childhoods. He offered his own perspective as someone who had observed the palace operations for years, suggesting that perhaps designated family areas could have clearer boundaries or more visible markers to help the children stay oriented. The prince and princess listened carefully to James's suggestions. They seemed genuinely interested in his input, treating him as a valued member of the palace team rather than just a guard who followed orders. This respectful treatment made James feel proud of his service and more connected to the royal family's mission. Then Princess Catherine asked James a question that surprised him. She wanted to know if he would be willing to occasionally join the children's security detail during outdoor activities. She explained that they were looking for guards who not only understood security protocols, but also had good instincts about child welfare. After seeing how James had handled Charlotte's situation, they felt he would be an excellent addition to the team. James was honored by the offer. The children's security detail was considered a prestigious assignment, requiring both excellent professional skills and the right temperament to work around young children. He accepted without hesitation, expressing his gratitude for the trust they were placing in him. He promised to always put the children's safety and well-being first, while also maintaining the highest standards of Royal Guard protocol. Before the meeting ended, Prince William had one more surprise for James. He explained that James's actions had demonstrated the values that the royal family wanted to promote among their staff: duty, compassion, and good judgment. As a token of their appreciation, James was being awarded a commendation for his service. This would be added to his record and would be recognized at the next formal review ceremony. James was overwhelmed by this honor. He thanked the prince and princess repeatedly, his voice thick with emotion. He assured them that he required no special recognition for simply doing what was right, but they insisted that good deeds should be acknowledged and celebrated. They wanted other members of the palace staff to know that acting with kindness and humanity, even when it meant bending the rules, was valued and respected. As the meeting was concluding, the door opened and Charlotte bounded into the room. She had been waiting outside with Maria, hoping to see James again. Her face lit up when she saw him and she ran over to give him another quick hug. She told her parents that James was her friend now, and that she had been telling everyone about how brave and kind he was. James knelt down to Charlotte's level and told her that he was very happy to be her friend. He reminded her gently that she should always stay close to her nanny during outdoor play, so she wouldn't get lost again. Charlotte nodded seriously, promising to be more careful. Then she asked James if he would be around the palace more often, because she wanted to show him her favorite spots in the gardens. Prince William explained to Charlotte that James would indeed be around more often, as he would be helping with security during their outdoor activities. Charlotte clapped her hands with delight at this news. She immediately started planning all the things she wanted to show James, including the peacock gathering spot he had mentioned, and her secret reading nook in the rose garden. The warmth and happiness in the room were palpable. What had started as a moment of protocol breaking had evolved into a beautiful example of human connection. James felt grateful not only for the recognition he had received, but also for the opportunity to be part of something meaningful. He had joined the Royal Guard to serve his country and protect the royal family, but he had never imagined he would form such a genuine connection with them. As James prepared to leave, Princess Catherine gave him one final message. She told him that they wanted their children to grow up, knowing that rules and protocols were important, but that kindness and compassion were even more important. By helping Charlotte when she needed it, James had taught her a valuable lesson about what it meant to be a good person. That lesson, the princess said, was worth more than any rule or regulation. In the weeks following the incident, James's life at the palace changed in wonderful ways. He began his new assignment with the children's security detail, which meant he was regularly present during the young royals' outdoor activities. He maintained his professional demeanor at all times, but there was now a friendly familiarity between him and Princess Charlotte that brought joy to everyone who witnessed it. True to her word, Charlotte would wave at James whenever she saw him on duty, and when circumstances allowed, James would give her a subtle wink or a small smile in return. These tiny moments of connection never interfered with his duties, but they added a layer of warmth to the formal palace environment. Other staff members noticed and appreciated how James had managed to form a genuine bond with the princess while still maintaining appropriate boundaries. James also discovered that his actions had inspired other members of the palace staff. Several guards and security personnel approached him privately to express their admiration for what he had done. They told him that they had sometimes struggled with the tension between strict protocol and human compassion, and that seeing James choose kindness had encouraged them to trust their own instincts more. James was humbled by these conversations. never having intended to become any sort of role model. The story of James helping Charlotte had spread throughout the palace community, though it was kept private from the media. The royal family valued their privacy, especially regarding the children, and they didn't want the incident to become a public spectacle. However, within the palace walls, the story became a beloved example of the kind of culture the family wanted to cultivate among their staff. One particularly memorable day, Charlotte asked if James could join her and her siblings for their weekly nature walk through the Windsor grounds. This was a supervised activity, where the children would explore the gardens, learn about plants and animals, and enjoy some outdoor exercise. James was initially hesitant, as this seemed to cross into territory that was more personal than professional, but Prince William specifically requested his presence. During the nature walk, James found himself walking alongside the three young royals. Prince George, who was older and more reserved than Charlotte, asked James thoughtful questions about his military background and training. Princess Charlotte chattered away about everything she saw, pointing out flowers and insects and asking James if he knew what they were called. Little Prince Louis, still quite young, simply held James's hand and giggled as they walked. James was struck by how normal and happy the children were. Despite their royal status and the formal environment they lived in, they were just kids who loved playing outside and exploring nature. He felt privileged to be part of these moments, helping to provide them with security while also allowing them the freedom to just be children. The nature walk took them past the area where Charlotte had gotten lost weeks earlier. She pointed it out to her brothers, telling them the story of how she had followed a peacock and gotten confused by all the similar-looking paths. George reminded her gently that she needed to be more careful, while Louis asked if they could find the peacock. James offered to show them the area where the peacocks typically gathered, and the children excitedly agreed. When they reached the peacock area, they were lucky enough to find several of the magnificent birds preening in the afternoon sun. Charlotte was thrilled, and she thanked James for keeping his promise to show her. The children watched the peacocks for several minutes, fascinated by their beauty and elaborate displays. James stood nearby, ensuring their safety while allowing them to enjoy the moment. As the weeks turned into months, James became a familiar and trusted presence in the young royals' lives. He was never intrusive or overstepping boundaries, but he was there when needed, providing both security and occasional companionship. He attended their outdoor birthday parties, stood watch during their garden playtime, and was present at various family events held on the palace grounds. Princess Catherine occasionally thanked James for his continued dedication to the children's safety and happiness. She told him that Charlotte had grown more confident about exploring the palace grounds, knowing that there were kind people like James who would help her if she ever needed it. This confidence, the princess explained, was exactly what they hoped their children would develop as they grew up in the unique environment of royal life. James also noticed positive changes in his fellow guards. The story of his decision to help Charlotte had sparked conversations about how to balance protocol with practical wisdom. The palace security leadership began incorporating scenarios into training, where guards had to make judgment calls about when to maintain strict protocol and when to adapt to unusual circumstances. James was even asked to participate in some of these training sessions, sharing his experience and perspective. One day, James received an unexpected letter. It was written in careful, childish handwriting on official palace stationery. The letter was from Princess Charlotte. She had written to thank him again for helping her when she was lost, and to tell him that he was one of her favorite people at the palace. She had included another drawing, this time showing both of them looking at peacocks together. James treasured this letter. He kept it in a private place, knowing it was something he would cherish for the rest of his life. It represented not just a kind gesture from a princess, but a reminder of why he had chosen to serve. His job wasn't just about standing still and looking impressive. It was about protecting people, including vulnerable children who sometimes needed help finding their way home. The relationship between James and the royal family continued to deepen in appropriate and meaningful ways. He was invited to family events not as just another guard, but as someone who had demonstrated genuine care for the children. He attended their Christmas gathering at the palace, where Charlotte proudly introduced him to extended family members as the guard who had helped her. He was present at various ceremonies and celebrations, always professional but also warmly welcomed. James never forgot the lesson he had learned that day when Charlotte asked for his help. Sometimes the most important thing a person can do is simply be kind when someone needs it. Rules and protocols have their place, and they're important for maintaining order and safety. But they should never prevent us from helping others, especially children who are scared and vulnerable. Years passed and James continued his distinguished service with the Royal Guard. He had been promoted twice, recognition not just of his excellent security work, but also of his positive influence on palace culture. He had become a senior member of the children's security team, training new guards in the delicate balance between maintaining protocol and exercising compassionate judgment. Princess Charlotte grew from a sweet 7-year-old into a poised and thoughtful young lady. She never forgot James and the kindness he had shown her that day when she was lost. As she matured, she understood even better what he had risked by choosing to help her. She recognized that he had put her welfare above his own career concerns, and that kind of selfless service made a lasting impression on her. Whenever Charlotte saw James at palace events or during security duties, she made a point to acknowledge him warmly. As she got older, their interaction became more sophisticated, but the underlying friendship and mutual respect remained constant. James watched with pride as Charlotte developed into a young woman who embodied the values of kindness and consideration that her parents had worked to instill. One spring afternoon, James was supervising security for a garden party at Windsor Castle. The event was a charity fundraiser hosted by the royal family, and many distinguished guests were in attendance. Charlotte, now a teenager, was helping her mother greet guests and participate in the event's activities. She moved through the crowd with grace and confidence, speaking easily with people of all ages. During a quiet moment in the party, Charlotte approached James. She told him that she was giving a speech later that afternoon about the importance of kindness and compassion in public service. She wanted him to know that her speech was partly inspired by the example he had set years ago when he chose to help a lost little girl despite the potential consequences. James was deeply moved by Charlotte's words. He told her that he was simply doing what anyone with a good heart would do, but she disagreed. She explained that many people talk about kindness and compassion, but when faced with rules and regulations, they often choose the path of least resistance. James had chosen differently, and that choice had taught her an important lesson about character and integrity. When the time came for Charlotte's speech, James stood at his post near the garden's edge, listening as she spoke to the assembled guests. She talked about the importance of creating a society where people felt empowered to help one another, even when it meant going beyond strict rules. She shared a story without mentioning names about a time when someone had shown her extraordinary kindness when she needed it most. As Charlotte spoke, James felt a swell of emotion. The little girl he had helped years ago had grown into a remarkable young woman who was using her platform to promote the very values that had guided his decision that day. He realized that his choice to break protocol had rippled outward in ways he never could have imagined, influencing not just Charlotte but potentially countless others who would hear her message. After the speech, many guests approached Charlotte to commend her words. She graciously accepted their praise, but James noticed her glancing in his direction several times with a warm smile. Later, when the formal part of the event concluded, Charlotte made her way over to where James was stationed. She thanked him again for being such an important part of her life and told him that she hoped his story would inspire others to choose kindness over convenience. James's experience also had a lasting impact on palace operations. The security protocols were revised to include provisions for emergency situations involving the royal children. Guards were given clearer guidance on when and how to deviate from standard procedures if a child's immediate welfare required it. James participated in developing these new guidelines, ensuring they balanced security needs with practical human compassion. The story of James and Charlotte became part of palace folklore, shared among staff members as an example of the best kind of service. New guards joining the royal household would hear about the guard who broke protocol to help a lost princess, and how that decision was celebrated rather than punished. It became a teaching moment about what truly mattered in royal service. Not blind adherence to rules, but thoughtful dedication to the well-being of the family they protected. James eventually retired from active guard duty, but he remained connected to the royal household in an advisory capacity. He was often invited to special family events, and he maintained his friendship with Charlotte and her siblings. They all remembered him as someone who had shown them genuine kindness during their childhood, treating them as people rather than just royal figures. On the day of James's retirement ceremony, Princess Charlotte attended to personally thank him for his years of service. She presented him with a special commendation, signed by her parents, recognizing his exemplary service and positive influence on palace culture. She also gave him a framed photo from that long-ago day when he had walked her back to the gardens, her small hand in his. Someone had captured the moment on a security camera, and the image showed the trust and connection between a little girl and the guard who had chosen to help her. In her remarks at the ceremony, Charlotte spoke about how James had taught her an invaluable lesson about character. She said that true integrity meant doing the right thing even when it was difficult or risky, and that James had demonstrated this quality in a way that had shaped her own values. She expressed gratitude not just for the specific day he had helped her, but for all the years of dedicated service he had given to her family. James listened to Charlotte's words with tears in his eyes. He had never imagined that one simple decision to help a child would lead to such a meaningful relationship and lasting impact. He thought back to that sunny morning when a little girl in a blue polka dot dress had asked him for help, and how his heart had told him what his training could not. He had followed his instincts, and it had changed both their lives. As the ceremony concluded, Charlotte gave James a final hug, no longer the quick embrace of a child, but the heartfelt gesture of a young woman saying goodbye to a dear friend. She whispered her thanks once more, and told him that he would always be welcome at the palace. James promised to visit and to stay in touch with the family he had served so faithfully. In the years that followed, James often reflected on his time at Windsor Castle. He gave interviews for palace publications, sharing his experiences and encouraging other guards to trust their judgment and lead with compassion. He became known as an advocate for balancing tradition with humanity, arguing that the best service came from people who understood both protocol and people. Charlotte went on to take on more royal duties as she grew older, always carrying with her the lessons she had learned as a child. She became known for her approachable manner and her genuine concern for others. When asked in interviews about influences in her life, she would sometimes mention the palace staff who had shown her kindness and taught her important values, though she never revealed the specific story to protect James's privacy. The peacocks still wandered the grounds of Windsor Castle, their beautiful feathers catching the sunlight just as they had on that fateful day. Sometimes when Charlotte walked through the palace gardens, she would stop to watch them and remember the adventure that had led her to one of the most important friendships of her life. She would think about James and smile, grateful for the day she had been brave enough to ask for help, and grateful that he had been kind enough to give it. James lived a happy retirement, often visiting his niece who had grown up alongside Charlotte. He would tell her stories about his time at the palace, emphasizing the importance of kindness and doing what was right. His niece listened with wonder, proud of her uncle and the choices he had made. The story of Princess Charlotte and the royal guard who broke protocol became a quiet legend within the palace walls. It was never sensationalized or shared with the media, but it lived on in the hearts of those who knew about it. It reminded everyone that sometimes the most memorable moments come not from following every rule perfectly, but from listening to your heart when someone needs help. James's decision that day had proven that true service was about more than standing still and looking impressive. It was about being present, being aware, and being willing to act with compassion when the situation called for it. He had shown that protocol existed to serve people, not the other way around, and that the best guards were those who could balance discipline with humanity. The legacy of that single moment of kindness continued to influence the palace culture for years to come. New staff members learned that they worked in a place where doing the right thing was valued above blind obedience. They understood that the royal family appreciated people who cared deeply about their welfare, especially the welfare of the children. Princess Charlotte never forgot the lesson she learned that day about the importance of asking for help when you need it, and about the goodness that exists in people who are willing to offer it. As she took on more responsibilities within the royal family, she made sure to create an environment where staff felt empowered to use their best judgment and to act with kindness. The story that began with a little girl chasing a peacock and getting lost had become something much bigger. It had become a testament to the power of human connection, the importance of compassion, and the lasting impact that one person's kindness can have on another's life. James had given Charlotte safety and guidance when she needed it most, and in return, she had given him a sense of purpose and meaning that extended far beyond his duties as a guard. As the sun set over Windsor Castle on countless evenings, the peacocks would settle in for the night, their beautiful feathers folded, and somewhere, whether at the palace or in his quiet home, James would think about the day he chose kindness over protocol, and he would smile, knowing that it had been the best decision he ever made. The little princess who had begged for his help had grown into a remarkable young woman, and he had been privileged to play a small part in her journey. That privilege, that connection, that moment of simple human kindness was worth more than any commendation or recognition could ever express.